So, the topic for today is how we end up in the same room. Um, there is creative abundance, yet somehow outcomes are becoming more and more predictable. So, today I sort of want to understand how did we get here. So, to begin with, let's start by playing one of my favorite games. Can you spot the difference? So, I'm going to show you some pictures. Tell me if you guys can find differences. So, what's wrong with these pictures? Can you find any differences? What's happening? There are 5 different films, right? 5 different heroes, but it's one same face. Rugged, bearded, unbothered. Pushpa isn't Devara. Devara isn't Kabir Singh, but I bet if you squint hard enough, you can't tell them apart. Here's another one. Can you spot any differences here? What if I tell you that these are all pictures of different cafes, not of the same one? Again, 4 different founders, 4 different cities, but the same wooden counter, same hanging bulb, same floor. Honestly, if I wasn't making this presentation and I saw this slide, I would assume that these pictures are all from the same cafe. Here's another one. Do you think any of these brands are really trying hard to be different? No, right? Do you see the browns? Do you see the minimalism? Do you see all the brands looking pretty much the same, doing the same thing? I got this last example just so that it doesn't feel like I'm cherry picking. These are screens that we see at least 5 times a day nowadays, right? So if there's no logo on the screen, can you tell me which screen is for which beloved AI tool? I really can't tell them apart. Actually, I feel like I want to give it up for Claude for having a tiny bit of personality. It's been my favorite for a reason, right? Okay, let's get into that. This idea for the presentation, it started with a thought. We live in a world with more creators, more AI tools, more data than any generation before us, more choices than we know what to do with. So you'd assume that we'd be surrounded by originality. Instead, I found myself asking a question, not because I had an answer, but just because I couldn't stop noticing it. Why, with more creators, better tools, and easier access to inspiration than ever, do products, brands, even people feel increasingly similar? It's not one industry, it's not one lazy team, it's literally showing up everywhere. Design researchers actually have a name for this exact moment. They call it the opt out era. The idea is simple. After years of loud, maximalist branding fighting for attention, brands and designers opted out. They opted out on purpose into the same clean, minimal look all around the same time. Here's the proof. Searches for clean layout and simple branding jumped up by 54% in the last year alone. And it's not just happening online. Walk into any specialty cafe, the wood counter, the hanging bulb, the concrete floor, and you're not looking at one designer's taste, right? You're looking at a business model. Third Wave Coffee alone served over 7.1 million cups last year. That look isn't a coincidence anymore. It's a formula and it's scaling fast. Let's look at an industry that everyone thinks they understand and I personally find very interesting, Bollywood. Bollywood isn't being replaced by Hollywood. It's being replaced by itself, just from a different state. Dubbed South Indian films now make up 31% of Hindi cinema's total box office collections. Not a niche segment, nearly a third of everything Hindi speaking audiences are watching. But here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same time, there's a counter trend, and these numbers are from the same Canva India Design Trends 2026. There were searches for Desi motifs that went up by 26%. Hindi typography went up by 17%. So brands are kind of going heritage, and they are doing that on purpose, specifically to escape the minimalist sameness. However, here's the problem. Even the rebellion against sameness is turning into its own trend. Everyone is opting out together, which raises the real question. Why does every attempt to be different keep ending the same way? So in all these examples that I've given, you may have noticed something interesting. Nobody from blue to Kai called third wave. Shahid Kapoor didn't call Allu Arjun, or at least so I hope. Notion didn't ask ChatGPT which shade of white to use. So, what's coordinating all of this? Why is this happening? Here's something worth understanding before we go any further. There's a well known idea in organizational sociology called institutional isomorphism. Two researchers, DiMaggio and Powell, they introduced it in the early 1980s. The argument was pretty simple. Organizations in the same industry tend to become more alike over time. And one of the biggest reasons for this is uncertainty. Other organizations start mimicking whoever looks successful under uncertainty. This concept is also called mimetic isomorphism. When nobody knows what's going to work, the safest move isn't to invent something new, it's to copy whoever already looks like they're succeeding. Look at India's biggest films in the last couple of years. Stree 2, in fact, the whole Maddock universe. Bhool Bhulaiya 3, everyone a sequel. In fact, most major Hollywood releases in Indian theaters in the last couple of years have also been a sequel or a franchisee film. Nobody really ran out of ideas. They were just managing risk. Retail does this too on purpose. Look at Trent. It's the Tata owned company behind Westside Zudio and Star, which is their grocery retail section. Trent doesn't treat fashion, value fashion, and groceries as separate problems. They call it, and they literally call it, the Trent playbook. They built their own product, they put their own name on it, they control the whole thing, and then they run the exact approach across every category. And here's proof that it works. At Star, which is their grocery format, 73% of what they sell is their own brand. Not 73% of ideas just happening to be good, right? It's one playbook that is applied 73% of the time. That's the first force, copying on purpose. But it can't explain why convergence feels faster than ever. There's a second force at work, and this one is stranger. Nobody is deciding this on purpose at all. So we all know how algorithm loops work, right? You watch something, the algorithm notices, and it shows you more of the same thing. Do that a few million times a day across a few million people, and the algorithm isn't just reacting to trends anymore, it's manufacturing them. 87% of Indian creators now use AI to scale production, 21% for idea generation alone. That sounds efficient, but here's the catch. Those tools learn from what's already trending, then hand the creators more of the same, just faster. Here's my favorite example, and you guys can actually do it. Search hashtag Bhagavad Gita on Instagram, 600K posts, almost all of them the same 15-second format. A verse, a caption, a book recommendation. Even a 2000-year-old sacred text got templated by the algorithm. And even that isn't enough. There's one more force at work. Even if you knew better, you still probably wouldn't choose differently. We've seen sequels, playbooks, the same formats reused again and again, and here's why. Genuinely new ideas fail 96% of the time. That's the actual track record of radical innovation across industries over decades. For example, here's what the 4% looks like in real life. Tata Nano, 2008. It was a genuinely radical idea, world's cheapest car, built to give millions of two-wheeler families something safer. Tata actually projected 250,000 sales a year, actually 250,000 sales a year. They never got close. By 2018, it was gone. Another example, Tumba, 2018. It was, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, an original folklore horror. Nothing else in Bollywood looked like it at the time. Critics loved it, but audiences didn't show up. It flopped. But here's my favorite example, Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola actually tells the story on their own website. In 1985, they changed the formula, the actual secret formula, for the first time in 99 years. Almost 2 lakh people in blind taste tests said that they preferred this new formula. Then Coca-Cola launched it. People weren't angry about the taste. They were angry that something changed at all. Consumer hotline calls went from 400 a day to 1,500 a day. In fact, one man in Texas bought $1,000 of the old formula just to hoard it. Someone wrote to the CEO and addressed him Chief Dodo. 79 days later, they brought the old formula back. So in this case, the data said people liked the new one better, but it didn't matter. Sometimes the radical bet isn't even wrong on the data. People did prefer the taste and it still failed because the safe choice wasn't about taste at all. It was about identity and habit. Now, imagine this. Put yourself in a room, Trent deciding what to stock, a studio deciding whether to greenlight the next, I don't know, Singham, or something that nobody's seen before. Bet on the radical idea, and you've got about 4% chance of it working. Reuse the playbook instead, the sequel, the formula that already worked, and you're far more likely to survive the quarter. Nobody in that room is stupid or lazy. Everyone's doing the smart, rational thing. And that's exactly the problem. When every boardroom does the same math, they arrive at the same answer at the same time. The category doesn't converge by accident, it converges because everyone independently made the correct decision. Okay, so we've kind of solved the mystery. Companies are copying winners, algorithms are creating loops, and rational risk aversion is sort of placed on top of both of them. So that's the machine. But here's the strange thing: the deeper I looked, the less convinced I became that originality had actually disappeared. And here's the plot twist. There's a study worth knowing about. Researchers from MIT and Spotify ran a large scale experiment on Spotify's own platform, looking at what personalized recommendations actually do to what people listen to. The paper is called The Engagement Diversity Connection. They found two things happening at the same time. First, each individual listener's own discovery got 11.5% less diverse. In plain terms, that means the average person left to the algorithm ends up hearing a narrower range of music than before. Your own personal variety shrinks. Second, and this is the part that surprises most people, the total variety being consumed across the entire platform, everyone combined, actually grew almost 6%. So while any one person's world got smaller, the collective pool of everything being listened to across millions of years got bigger. Here's what that actually means. Your world got smaller, the world did not. Culture didn't disappear or flatten out, it got sorted. Imagine millions of separate rooms, each one playing the same handful of songs on repeat, and the door shut to the room next door. It may feel like the culture is shrinking in your room, but you step outside all the rooms and look at the whole building, and the variety is still there. It's just been divided up and locked behind separate doors. There's a term for this. Again, two MIT researchers with really difficult names to pronounce, but the names are there on the screen, called it cyber balkanization, after the way the Balkans splintered into small isolated states after World War One, and they kind of, to put it very plainly, stopped talking to each other. The same thing happens with information. Instead of one shared culture, you get millions of separate rooms, each playing the same three songs on repeat, but the door shut to the room next door. So culture isn't dying, it's splitting. Sameness isn't happening because the world has fewer ideas. It's happening because each of us keeps seeing fewer of them. So far, we've explained how the machine works, but knowing what to do about it is a different question, and it's actually personal for all of us. Everything so far has been about them, studios, brands, algorithms. But here's the uncomfortable part. As researchers, we are inside the system as well. There's a report called Kantar's India in Search, built from about 400 search topics, a snapshot of what the country is searching for. Different brands, different categories, all shaping their strategy of the same source every year. Even we use this report for our researchers. Now add this, 77% of creators call AI an essential partner. That means most of them aren't building an independent process. They're pulling from same handful of tools, the same prompts, the same defaults. And to this, in fact, add one more. Most event discovery in this country runs through a single platform, Book My Show. Maybe District is also up and coming, but majorly it's still happening through Book My Show. Even the way people find out what's happening culturally is filtered through one company's algorithm. So put all of that together. Same report, same tools, same platform for you and every competitor you have. What do you think comes out the other end? Not different strategies, but the same strategy dressed up to look different. Maybe the problem was never effort. Maybe it's the question that we've been asking. So we just spent like 15 minutes proving something that sounds really depressing. The same interfaces, cafes, films, strategies. But that's not what we proved, right? Different never disappeared. We just stopped running into it. For years, the question has been, how do we create something different? I think this is the wrong question. Different already exists. What's scarce is contact with it. So the real question is, how do we expose ourselves to different signals? Remember the granny wave, basically the heritage shift towards the Desi motives and Hindi typography. Design researchers are calling it the granny wave. That's people already trying to break out of their own room on their own with nobody designing for it. So that instinct never left. The question is whether we build the door on purpose or wait for it to happen by accident, which actually brings me to the idea I want to leave you all with. Let's go back to where we started. How did we all end up in the same room? Nobody planned this. Nobody met and agreed on anything. We just had access to the same users, the same benchmarks, the same AI, the same data. And the data quietly took all of us into the same room. We've been staying in the same room. But the best ideas don't live in here. They live in the rooms we never walked into. So open secret doors and find new ways of looking.